Friday the 13th, Mother's Day. Prologue. The Grave. All alone in the dark woods, a large doe stood nibbling at a row of leafy green plants. Suddenly the animal raised her velvety head and listened, as if to some far-off sound. The deer's soft brown eyes stared off into the trees. Then, after a moment, the graceful animal lowered her head and continued chewing. In the distance, a twig snapped. The deer's legs tensed. Her head jerked toward the sound. She wrinkled her wet, dark nose as she tried to sniff out the danger. But apparently the deer didn't hear another noise or smell an intruder, because she relaxed again. Which was a shame, because the deer was right the first time. About 100 yards away, the hunter was moving slowly forward. He lowered his heavy black boots carefully, heel to toe, trying to keep noise to a minimum. The hunter was a tall, sinewy man with the black beard that covered most of his greasy face. His dark, unfeeling eyes were locked on the deer. The 4 fingers on his right hand were wrapped tightly around the wooden handle of his double-barreled 20-gauge shotgun. The hammer was already cocked. He kept moving forward. Stalking was hard work. Though it was only the beginning of May, the day was hot and humid even in the shade of the woods. The hunter was making tiny wheezing sounds as he breathed in and out through his mouth. To keep the smell of his body from alerting his prey, he was walking straight into the wind. And with this camouflage clothes and cap, he blended in well. He could see the doe clearly now. It was standing in a tiny clearing in the woods, a perfect target. Soon he'd be close enough to blow its head off. If it was illegal to kill a doe, he knew. But hey, it wasn't even hunting season, so what difference did it make what he killed? He could hear the deer eating now, hear it crunching on bushes and twigs. Just a few more steps, and the hunter's black boot struck something hard. Grunting, he sprawled forward, his shotgun flying out of his hand. He ended up face down in the dirt. He lifted his head just in time to see the white behind of the doe bobbing up and down as it bounced away deep into the woods. Furious, the hunter slammed a hand down against the bed of leaves and brown pine needles covering the forest floor. Then he got to his feet and turned around to see what the devil had tripped him. He stared down in amazement. Sticking straight up out of the ground, right out of the middle of nowhere, was a white stone about 7 inches high. Why, it was as if the stone's only goal in life were to trip him and save that lousy deer. The hunter kicked the stone with all his might. Thanks to his heavy black boots, he didn't hurt his toes, but the stone didn't budge either, and that just made him madder. It took 6 more hard kicks before the hunter's anger began to cool. Then his curiosity took over. Just what was this stone doing here anyway? Abruptly, the hunter smiled, revealing a row of crooked teeth. This stone had been planted here by someone, he now realized, and that meant he was looking at a crude grave marker. And the moment he thought that, an image appeared in his mind. A teenage boy, a bloody knife in his hand, his rotted face hidden behind a white hockey mask. Sure, he'd heard all the legends about Jason Voorhees and the gruesome murders the boy had committed in these parts. But until now, he'd dismissed them all as bunk. In fact, he'd helped to spread the rumors himself. If folks believed there was a death curse on Crystal Lake, it only made the hunter's job easier. It meant the woods would be deserted, and he would be free to do his poaching. But now that he had found this grave, the hunter suddenly felt very excited. Just think, maybe he'd stumbled on a souvenir of Jason's old murders. Who knew how much that'd be worth? The tall man dropped to his knees. He drew his long hunting knife out of its sheath and slammed the silver blade into the soft earth and began to dig. After a few minutes, he tossed the knife aside and started scrabbling in the dirt with his bare hands. Soon his fingers touched something smooth and wet and gray. When he cleared more dirt aside, he realized what he had found. It was an old cardboard box about 12 by 12 inches from the looks of it. He dug down deeper until he was able to lift the entire box from the ground. It was surprisingly heavy. Gently, the hunter lifted the box's soggy cardboard lid, and then he looked inside. His heart seemed to stop. His jaw dropped and his eyes bulged. He looked inside the box for only a moment. Then his legs started moving as if by themselves. carrying him backwards so fast that he fell, landing hard on his back. It was almost a minute before he was able to stop screaming. Chapter 1. Carly. The pink princess phone rang so hard it shook the nightstand. Carly answered on the second ring. Hello? Hey, Carly. A sexy guy's voice. Boone? Don't tell me I woke you up. It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, for Christ's sake. I mean, your mother doesn't make you go to bed this early, does she? Carly laughed, arched her back, and stretched. You didn't wake me up. I was just... She couldn't think of a good excuse. I was just sleeping, she admitted. She sat up, rubbing sleep from her green almond-shaped eyes. Thick beams of sunlight slanted through the lace curtains on her windows. It was Thursday afternoon. Saying these words to herself helped her clear her head. She always got disoriented when she fell asleep during the day. When the phone rang, her first thought had been that someone was screaming. She looked down. Next to her on the bed was a large blue book the size of a phone book. She stared at the book for a long moment before she remembered what it was. You know, Boone, she said, the stupid thing is I'm not even tired. But this American history stuff I'm reading is so boring that... Excuse me. Boone chuckled. Carly, you're a real party girl, you know that? She laughed again, but this time she felt a little stung. She knew her reputation. Little Miss Goody-Goody. A worried woman's voice cut in on the line. Hello? Who's calling, please? I've got it, Mom, Carly said. Frowning, she waited for the click as her mother hung up the downstairs extension. Why did her mother act like every phone call was going to bring bad news? If Carly was out somewhere at night and called in, which her mother always made her do, Mrs. McDonald would usually answer the phone by asking nervously, What is it, Carly? What's wrong? So, Boone, Carly said when she was sure the line was clear. How are you? Carly's mother had not been pleased, to say the least, when Carly started hanging with Boone. She couldn't really blame her. Billy Boone was 20, a high school dropout who wore his long brown hair in a ponytail and roared around town on a motorcycle. He worked, when he worked at all, at his father's hardware store. He lived over his parents' garage. Boone's only ambition in life seemed to be have a good time, which for Boone meant throwing wild parties and getting drunk. Of course, the things that Carly's mom hated about Boone were all the same things that made him so popular among the kids in town. Boone pretty much defined cool. Stories about Boone were legendary at Parker Memorial High. Though he was never caught, Boone was the one who had borrowed the school's Big Bear mascot uniform and mooned the entire stadium during the homecoming football game. Boone was the one who had gotten duplicate keys to the school gym and had staged what he called the real prom. It took place hours after the senior prom. Carly had only been a sophomore back then, with braces. She hadn't even known about the secret party. But rumor had it that Boone had wheeled in several kegs of beer and had presided over the festivities dressed as the school's principal, Miss Merriam. When everyone showed up at the school Monday morning, they found the gym totally trashed. The facility was damaged beyond compare. The faculty knew Boone was responsible. But Boone had already dropped out of school, and they didn't have any real proof. There wasn't much the school could do to him. Guess what you're doing this weekend? Boone now asked her. Carly's old gray cat, Theo, jumped up onto the bed and gave her a grumpy, yellow-eyed stare. She scratched under his chin. I give up. What? You're going camping. Camping? You mean like overnight? Carly's first thought was of her mother's reaction. Mrs. McDonald didn't even like her to stay out late. That's right, Carly. Overnight. There was a sarcastic edge to his voice, as if he were talking to a child. She made a gargoyle face at herself in her closet mirror. What was the matter with her anyway? Sounds great, she said. Terrific. Now she sounded like a chipper little Girl Scout. Far out, drawled Boone. We'll leave tomorrow at 9 sharp, and I'll... Boone? What? Tomorrow's a school day. And your point? So I have to go to school. There was a puzzled silence. Why? He asked finally. Then he cackled. All right, so we'll leave at 4 o'clock, as soon as you get out of school. The way he said it, he made it sound like something only 2-year-olds would bother with. It's about a 2.5-hour drive, so we'll... 2.5 hours? Carly, Boone said. He added a mock sigh. Look out your window. Do you see campgrounds? Do you see a huge, beautiful lake? Do you see thick green woods? In other words, do you see a spot where we can do whatever we want without anyone around to bother us? No, you don't. You see boring, old Newkirk, Massachusetts. That's why we have to drive north a little bit. It's this amazingly beautiful campground, Crystal Lake. Carly was already sure she wanted to go, but how would she get permission? That was the thing. Her mother... What are you going to do around here anyway? He pressed. He answered his own question. You're going to do nothing. That's what. I mean, what is there to do in Newkirk? This town is dead, Carly. It's dead. It was true. Newkirk was a small but well-off town about 40 minutes outside of Boston. It was a commuter town. Basically, that seemed to mean it was a place for grown-ups to sleep when they got home from work. As a result, on weekends in Newkirk, there never seemed to be anything for anyone to do. Kids all went to the movies, hung out at the mall, got drunk, did drugs if they could get them, and generally got into trouble. Every Monday at school, there were guys bragging about how they had puked their guts out over the weekend. Every month or so, some kid cracked up his car. Dumb, boring. Who else is going? She asked. Boone didn't answer right away. Whoops, thought Carly. Maybe, could it be, that Boone was suggesting a trip for just the two of them? The thought thrilled her, though she knew the chances of her mother agreeing to that were less than 0. She picked up her pink phone and started pacing around the room. It was amazing how fast life could change. Up until about 4 months ago, Boone had never even looked at Carly. She didn't think he even knew she existed. Then she made the girls' varsity basketball team at school. The team's captain was Kelly Boone, this really great tomboy of a girl, who also happened to be Boone's younger sister. Carly started spending time at Kelly's house, tutoring her in calculus, for free just as a favor. Then one night they were in the kitchen when Boone walked in from the garage wearing only a pair of jockey shorts. He didn't seem to care if they saw him. He just stood there half naked eating a slice of cold pizza, guzzling soda from the bottle and joking with Kelly. After mumbling a hello when Kelly introduced him, he didn't talk to Carly much. But 2 days later he called Carly and invited her to come over, hang out and listen to his rock band, the Rotting Corpses, while they practiced. Since then he'd called her pretty regularly, taken her for a ride on his motorcycle, she hadn't told her mom about that, and invited her to several of his famous parties. She had had to assure her mother more than once that she was not dating Boone. Unfortunately, this was the truth. As much time as they'd spend together, Carly always got the distinct feeling that her mother had nothing to worry about between her and Boone. Yes, they had these long talks sometimes, but Boone never made a pass. At his parties, he always seemed to have some bimbo around for that purpose. According to Carly's friend Suzanne, Boone didn't try anything because Carly gave off these straight-A, always-do-the-right-thing vibes, and that was a turnoff for guys. She had wanted to brain Suzanne for saying it, but she suspected she was correct. Who else is going? Boone repeated. Well, let's see. A whole bunch of cool people. I'm telling you, Carly, this is going to be the ultimate bash of the century. All thanks to the genius of your very own party guru, Billy Boone. Will I know anyone else? Carly was speaking from experience. She had learned that when Boone went off somewhere with one of his babes, his parties could be pretty lonely for her. You'll know me, he said. Besides you, silly. Well, the major bummer is that Kelly's got this wicked sore throat, so she's out. But who else? He made his voice casual. Monique? Carly's heart sank like a big rock in a deep lake. Monique was a transfer student from Paris. With her long, wavy, strawberry blonde hair, she had all the guys drooling. She definitely sent off the other kind of vibes, the I'll do something really bad, all you have to do is ask me vibes. Monique Dufay? Asked Carly. Dufay, Boone said. Yeah, that's the one. Carly felt her face flush red and warm. Lucky thing this wasn't a video phone. And here she'd been thinking, Boone, she said carefully to keep the disappointment out of her voice. You really are amazing, you know that? How did you pick up Monique already? She's only been here, what, one semester? Who said I picked her up? She's just going camping with us. But I didn't even know you knew her. How did you meet her? Well, Boone said, as you know, he slipped into a heavy and very bad French accent. I was always the star French student. Those teachers, they asked me to tutor this Monique with her English. Right. Boone had been kicked out of French class almost every other day. I met her at the pizza shop, sue me, Boone said, dropping the accent. Hey, he added suddenly, guess who else is coming? Who? Boone didn't answer. She could almost see him grinning as he teased her. Then she heard him chuckle. Who? She repeated, her curiosity piqued. Paul Sexton. Carly stopped pacing abruptly. Come on, Boone, seriously? Boone laughed harder. I knew that would hook you. It sure did. Paul Sexton, Paul, who had graduated just last year, was only one of the hunkiest guys in town. He had this silky blonde hair, so silky you wanted to pet it, a powerful jaw, a broad back, and rippling muscles. He was captain of just about everything, and his parents were rich. Girls all giggled about Paul's last name, but only because they thought it was so appropriate. And every girl at Parker was dying to find out firsthand just how appropriate that last name was. Boone, Carly said, Paul Sexton is at Brown. That's in Rhode Island, you know. Thanks for the information. It just so happens Paul and his freshman roommate are coming to this party. They're driving here tomorrow morning, and then we're all going up together. Carly couldn't help it. The thought of going camping in the woods with Paul Sexton made her feel a little faint. It made up for Boone's bringing along Monique in a big way. Carly studied herself in the mirror. Her awkward phase had certainly passed. She was wearing baggy shorts and an old maroon Harvard t-shirt that she and Suzanne had picked up once on a day trip into Cambridge. Not flattering clothing, but still her lanky and angular body showed through and looked good. With her short dark hair and her long thin neck, Carly had been getting plenty of stares lately. But Paul Sexton? Could she interest Paul Sexton? She tried to keep her voice sounding calm as she asked, And who else is going? Oh, right, like you care. I care. If I'm going to get permission from my mom, which I doubt, I'll have to tell her everyone that's Kyle and Suzanne. Carly grinned. Kyle and Suzanne spent so much time together, you never heard people say just one of their names. It was always Kyle and Suzanne, like it was one word or something. She was sort of hating Suzanne lately for spending so much time with Kyle that she never saw her, and for spacing out and forgetting whenever they made plans to get together. Still, she was glad Suzanne would be coming along. So, what do you say, Carly? Boone asked. The truth was, Carly was already set on going, but she didn't feel like admitting it just yet. I don't even know how to swim, she said. I'll teach you. Oh, right. I will. Easy. I have this special instructional system that gets incredibly fast results. I throw you in the lake, you either learn to swim or you drown. Oh, very funny. Carly twirled the long pink phone cord. There was a thump as Theo jumped down onto the fluffy white shag carpet and started lunging after the moving cord like a little tiger. Listen, Carly, can I say something? You don't swim, you don't drive. If your mother had her way, you'd never get out of that house. That's another reason you've got to come on this trip. You've got to learn to live a little. Carly blushed. Boone was right. She glanced around her room, reddening even more as she saw the room through Boone's eyes. It looked like the room of a 5-year-old, not a teenager. Everything was white or pink, and almost everything had a lace trim. The dust ruffle on her bed, the canopy above the four-poster, the window curtains, even her dictionary stand. Her mother had sewn it all. Well, thought Carly, she shouldn't hold it against her mom that she doted on her. A lot of Carly's friends wished their mothers would pay them some attention. Besides, Carly was an only child. Her father had died in a car accident when Carly was just 2. Her mother had been alone ever since. She had a right to be nervous about Carly's health and well-being. "Carly, you gotta come," Boone said. "I promised Paul you'd be there. That's like the only reason he's going." "Billy Boone, you are such a liar." "I'm not." Her heart started pounding. Look at me, she thought. A minute ago she couldn't keep her eyes open. Now she was getting so excited about this trip, she wondered if she'd be able to sleep tonight. "So?" Boone asked. "I'm tired of trying to convince you. What about it? Are you in, or are you out?" "I don't know," Carly said. "Sunday is Mother's Day. My mom and I usually do something special together." "Oh, jeez." Boone sounded truly disgusted. "Look, I promise we'll be back Sunday night, okay? You can be with her then." Carly felt her heart flutter. She had no excuses left, and that meant she was a goner. "Okay," she said, grinning. "I guess I'm in." Boone whooped. "But," Carly added quickly, "I don't know how I'm going to get permission. I really don't." "I'll take care of it." "How?" "I'll give your mom a call." "Oh, that'll really help," said Carly, rolling her eyes. "Trust me," Boone said. Carly sighed. The fact was, she did trust him. Anyway, there was no turning back now. Boone must have sensed her mood because he said, "Carly, you won't regret this. I promise you, right now, you're going to have the time of your life." Chapter 2. Buried Treasure. The voice. The voice told him what to do. There was nothing the hunter could do about it. He had to obey. First, he took the cardboard box back to his cabin. He set the box on his little white formica table. Then he sat stiffly in his one rickety wooden chair, waiting for darkness. That night the sky turned cloudy. No stars, no moon. By 8, the woods were pitch dark. There would be rain tonight. The hunter could feel it. It was time to follow the first part of the instructions. Putting on a pair of yellow work gloves, he hoisted a shovel over his shoulder, put the cardboard box under his arm, and set off into the darkness. Rick Perkins was having some construction work done a few miles down the road. He was digging out a foundation so he could build himself an even larger house. The greedy geezer. The hunter knew he could find what he needed there. He went on foot, staying by the side of the dirt road the whole way, ready to move into the woods at the sound of any approaching cars. As it turned out, this was an unnecessary precaution. He saw and heard no one, except the animals, that is. Amazing how noisy the woods were at night. Crickets chirping, frogs making that rivet sound, owls hooting, and his own large black boots tramping along the hard-packed dirt. It took about an hour to reach the construction site itself. There stood the huge yellow backhoe, its dirty metal shovel hanging down like a giant arm. The supervisor's shed was padlocked, but the hunter was prepared for this little problem. He'd brought along both a screwdriver and a flashlight. With these tools, it was easy enough to unscrew the rusty metal hasp and remove the padlock from the door. Inside the shed, he found the key for the backhoe hanging on a pegboard, its little white tag neatly marked as if for the hunter's convenience. When he turned the key in the backhoe's ignition, the powerful diesel engine roared and rumbled like an airplane. The hunter didn't care. The walk here had convinced him that there was no one around for miles, no one to see and no one to hear. He was able to drive all the way up the side on backcountry roads. The cardboard box sat on the seat beside him, jouncing up and down on the black leather seat. The hunter felt powerful sitting behind the wheel of the huge machine. The engine throbbed. The heat baked his legs. The metal flap on the exhaust pipe flipped up and down as smoke poured out. And all the while the voice guided him, telling him which way to turn. He drove until he came to an old abandoned house not far from Crystal Lake. It was a gray 2-story building set way back from the road across a large field. The hunter guided the giant yellow machine across the lawn. The backhoe's wide wheels made deep tracks in the overgrown grass. About 100 yards from the house, several small headstones jutted up from the grass in what seemed to be a small family cemetery. Just beyond the tiny cemetery, the voice ordered him to stop. He braked at once. Then the voice told him to dig. It took him a few minutes to master the levers, 4 large ones and 3 small ones, that controlled the machine's hydraulic arm. Finally, he got the hang of it and lowered the metal arm until the shovel's 4 metal teeth raked hard into the ground. It was a mild night, but digging was hard work, even with the help of the machine. The hunter was soon bathed in sweat. The mound of black dirt dug up by the backhoe kept growing and growing. The voice gave him no relief. There was no stopping, no pausing to rest. He had to dig deeper and deeper. Around midnight, the threatening skies finally broke. Streaks of lightning briefly lit up the lawn, revealing the eerie scene. The hunter and his machine digging and digging. Then came the rain, sheets of it, screaming down. That voice issued a new order. The hunter parked the backhoe by the edge of what was now a very deep hole. He retrieved his shovel from the cab floor and in the frenzy of the rainstorm started climbing down into the pit. The rain was rapidly turning his hole into a muddy gorge. He slipped and slid most of the way down. When he reached the bottom of the pit, he began digging hard. Though he was tired, he kept up a steady rhythm, the black, smelly dirt flying over his shoulder again and again. The rain made each shovel load twice as heavy, but he didn't slow down. He didn't stop. His clothes were soon drenched. His camouflage shirt was plastered to his skin. Rain drummed on the cardboard visor of his cap. He had no idea how deep he had dug. The night was so dark that when he looked up into the rainstorm, he couldn't tell where the hole ended and the sky began. Maybe he was burying himself alive. Maybe he would drown. It didn't matter. He had no choice. He had to follow orders. As he dug down even deeper, he began to hear the strangest sounds. At first, the sounds were faint, but they soon grew louder. He wouldn't quite make them out. They sounded like distant screams. Then the air turned foul. It smelled like rotten eggs, except with a sting to it that burned into the cartilage of his nose and beyond. There seemed to be a vapor rising up around the heavy black boots, a thick yellowish mist that wound itself around his legs like a living thing. And then there was the snake. It oozed through the muddy water around his feet. He felt it sliding up his pant leg, felt its leathery skin rubbing against his own. He must be seeing things, feeling things, he told himself. He kept digging. The shovel slipped out of his grasp, and when he bent down to pick it up, he saw that the wet ground was moving. He looked closer. There were worms in the hole, thousands of them. Worms so white they must never have seen the sun. Worms with thick, bulging bellies. He shouted in disgust and fear, but only for a moment. The terror passed, and he forced himself to pick up his shovel and keep digging. Almost immediately, the shovel struck something hard. He lifted the blade of the shovel so that the driving rain could wash off the mud, and he could see what he had found. It was thin and white, and pitted with tiny black holes. On his own, in the darkness, the hunter would never have known what it was or what to do with it. But the voice had told him he would find this object here. It was the mask, the hockey mask Jason Voorhees had worn to hide his rotted face. Several thick white worms were sliding in and out of the masked eye holes. The hunter banged the mask against his leg to knock off the worms as the thunder boomed overhead. Then he tossed aside his camouflage cap. With 2 yellow-gloved hands, the hunter carefully placed the wet mask over his face. As he did so, he felt a strange power surge through his body, making him shake and quiver, both with pleasure and pain. It was as if he had just been given a whole new supply of blood. stronger and more potent, but blood with bits of glass in it. His mouth twisted into a silent scream. Lightning flashed and thunder boomed. Just then, another bolt of lightning streaked down through the sky. If there had been anyone around to see, which there wasn't, the flash of lightning would have provided just enough light to glimpse the hunter deep in his pit. His arms were lifted toward the sky. His masked face was tilted up into the driving rain. Behind the mask's small round eye holes, the hunter's dark eyes gleamed hatefully. The fun was about to begin. Okay, this has been the prologue and chapters 1 and 2 of Friday the 13th, Mother's Day by Eric Morse. I myself only read a couple of these books back whenever I was in middle school, and I don't remember them that well. I don't remember this at all. I know it's a young adult novel, and I know that Jason Voorhees is more of a possessor in these books. Like whoever puts the mask on, Jason possesses their body, a la Jason Goes to Hell sort of thing, without having to eat the heart. But so far, I'm enjoying this book, especially that last chapter. And I'm really looking forward to see what comes next. So let me know in the comments section if you're enjoying this book so far, even though it's a young adult novel. And let me know what you think so far. And until next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening. And originally, the intro song for this video was Don't Fear the Reaper, but YouTube was blocking the video in America if I used that song, so I went ahead and reverted back to Don't Stop Me Now by Queen. But you know what? That song just works. I don't know why it works, but it just does. Everybody have a good night, and I'll see you soon.